Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for joining today's webinar, Gimmal Migrate, a Solution Showcase. We appreciate everyone joining us today. And the first thing I'd like to do is just take a second and introduce our speakers. My name is Shayna Horka and I work in product marketing here at Gimmal. And I'm joined by our key speaker today, Solutions Architect John Couvillon. Now, before we get started, I have just a couple of housekeeping items to go through. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to submit them in the Q&A section on your screen, and we're going to answer as many as we have time for at the end of the presentation. There will be at least one poll question that you will see pop up, so please keep an eye out for that. All answers are anonymous. And as always, if you have any technical difficulties, please let us know so we can assist you. To kick things off, I have just a couple of slides here to tell you a little bit about Gimmal and how we can help you take control of your information with our suite of solutions. Gimmal is a records information management and governance software company that was founded in 2002. Our goal is to help you achieve your information governance goals by providing solutions that balance the value your information provides with the risk it also presents. Whether you're trying to discover information in unstructured data sources, migrate from legacy systems, or comply with policies across multiple repositories, Gimmal can help you achieve your information governance goals. We have a client success team and a global network of partners that deliver solutions in conjunction with key partners like Microsoft and SAP. Gimmal's family of software products work together to let you create an efficient digital workplace. Our comprehensive solutions include migration, file analysis, electronic and physical records management, and document management for SAP. For those of you who are not new to our webinars, you may notice a slight name change. They are the same products, just with a more convenient name. But without further ado, I will hand it over to John so he can get started with today's presentation.
Okay, thanks, Shayna. We're going to start with a quick poll here. We're asking what legacy ECM platforms your organization is currently using. Please answer as many as you want there, multiple choice. And we're going to show the results after everyone has an opportunity to answer.
Looks like we have the results, so we will share them on the screen.
All right, so we've got a mix of content server, live link, people still using eDocs, SharePoint 2013, 2016, and a good number of people have network file shares. No surprise there. So we're gonna talk about today a couple of ways to handle a few of those platforms for you. Let's move forward in the presentation here. So today we're going to talk about our migration suite, but before we do that, we're going to just talk about some of the complexities and the challenges and the problems and the reason why people are looking to move. Cost and complexity amongst others are the two top players in reasons why a lot of our customers are looking to move off of OpenText. They're still paying high annual maintenance costs, fees, having to find resources that are gone from their organization to help support their technologies. OpenText cloud offering is there, but it's not really on par with the on-prem offering, which a lot of people have. And then, as most organizations do, they have multiple duplicate infrastructure supporting ECM technologies that they want to try to either simplify or unify into one platform. And then upgrades are always costly, and you're having to keep up, because if you don't keep up, then you don't get the support. Not to mention these things, but also the tool set just may not be fitting your requirements anymore, just may not be meeting your business case. In most cases, many people are choosing to move to Microsoft 365 as a foundational technology in their organization, not just for SharePoint or for managing ECM, but for all of the other benefits you get from that platform, like Azure and the Power Platform, Teams, you name it. And so the benefits for moving to Microsoft 365 are clear. You're looking at eliminating duplication and making it easier for your users. A lot of robust features that you don't get in some of the old legacy platforms. Then you're taking care of the cost side of this by eliminating the need for specialized staffing or resources to help support your upgrades and your maintenance on the software and the hardware that you're keeping up and running for this old proprietary platform. And then also you're unifying your stack, and you've got one platform, one user license to pay for to get all of that, and you're eliminating costs in that way as well. So migration is not necessarily an easy thing to do. We do a whole lot of them, and what we find is the biggest part is the process and the planning, not just the tools, because you've got to look at everything that you're doing in your legacy platform, everything from managing forms and just different structures of data, projects, compound documents and metadata, your document management, your records management, possible integration with other tools, collaborations, all of that. You've got to look, in some cases, you've got to look to move towards your SharePoint Online while you're doing your migration. So it can be a daunting task to think about all of that. And you want to be able to do that fast and efficiently. And where we come into to the picture here is with our migration suite, which I'm going to talk about here. Now, some of you may recall that we acquired ECMWise as the underlying technology. You're going to see that on some of the products that I show you, but we rebranded that product. Is called Gimmal Migrate, and that's our suite of tools that's going to help you move directly from OpenText Content Server or LiveLink or Documentum straight over to Microsoft 365. Additionally, we can help you move from network file shares straight into Microsoft 365. And we're going to preserve all of the information that you have in your content server environment, all of the dates, all of the metadata, all of the records classifications. All of the audit history can also be preserved, and we can take care of some of the complexities that are going to hit you when you try to move into SharePoint, which is a different platform. There are structural differences. There are little small differences between the way that each of those two platforms manage their information. So there's going to be things that you have to handle during the migration to make sure that you can seamlessly move your data across. And with our products, we can help you achieve that and simplify that, what normally would be a complex task and could potentially require a lot of manual intervention. We can make that seamless. We can show you how you can use your audit history, your audit trail, your logs to show everything that's happened to your content as it's moving from content server straight into Microsoft 365 or SharePoint Online. And so now, without further ado, I'm going to jump into a demo. And I'm going to start. I'm going to start with our first tool. As part of our Gimmal Migrate suite is our Content Server Discovery and Analytics tool. Won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but a lot of the challenge with migrating from content server is understanding what is there. A lot of times customers have had content server environments up and running for 10, 12, 15 years, and it's just been upgraded and upgraded. And so they've got a lot of data in there that they really just don't understand, because people that were supporting it maybe 5, 10 years ago are no longer in the organization. Or maybe a company acquired another company that had a legacy content server or live link environment. They brought it in, those people are gone. Now you've got to uncover what's there. So we have this discovery and analytics tool, which can actually look through your real content server environment. And just to show you that I'm not fudging something behind the scenes, we have a live content server environment here. And today, our use case, we're going to be looking at our finance department. We're going to migrate our finance information here, where we've got some folders and some various types of information here to move. We're going to migrate that over to our SharePoint Online tenant and put that in our finance document library. And we can see that that's empty now, and we're going to hopefully populate that a little later when we get to that. So I can drill into my content server environment, and I can start to run reports on this. And what can I do with that? Well, I can see, do an analysis report where I can see what kind of information do I have in there? What kinds of files? What are the MIME types? Do I have a whole lot of items that are just checked out and that are just sitting there checked out that may cause me some problems later when I go to migrate? What about metadata? Do I have categories and attributes on this information in my repository? And if so, what? How much is there? What can I do with that if I'm going to move this to Microsoft 365? I'm going to want to be able to map that to my content types and properties inside of SharePoint Online. So I've got to kind of know what I've got in order to do that mapping. And that's part of your upfront planning. What about empty containers? What am I going to do with that? I can also look at returning only things within a certain time frame. If I know I'm going to only migrate maybe the last 5 years of data, I can limit my reporting on that. I can also highlight where I might have some path length issues. As you know, SharePoint Online will only support total path lengths of 400 characters. And that includes your site collection name. So you've got to be able to be careful about lifting data that's in your content server environment and shifting it over and importing that directly into SharePoint Online, and knowing that you might have some issues with deep folder paths. What about security? You may not be moving your security verbatim from content server over to SharePoint. In fact, that's something we don't really recommend you do if you're going to be implementing your SharePoint Online and moving data. We always recommend you take the time to reinvent what's there and redo it and refactor it to match Microsoft's recommendations as far as permissions and control of that information. But what this can do for you is give you an idea of what you have in this system. Again, if it's an old system, you may not know what the security looks like. So you can do some interrogation and see what that looks like. And also, we can do some deduplication reporting. Now, we don't actually do any deduplication activities, but we can highlight where we think there might be some duplication, where people may have been just bulk copying folders here and there inside your content server environment. We can indicate that these might be copies based on file names and sizes underlying the name of the object in content server. And then once I run this report, I can actually open that up and I can dive into that report. And I'll open up this real quick and show you what this looks like. And this is purely informational. It's reading from the content server environment. It's not doing anything to the content server environment, and it's not doing anything to move any of this information. It's just for planning purposes and analysis, so that you can plan your process a lot better. Now, once it's finished, I can click on that and it will open up a folder with my reports. And I'll just really quickly open up this analysis report so you can see what kind of information we're getting here. And you see the different corresponding reports to what I ran. Totals, so if this is a large amount of volume, you'll see the volume data, where I ran, the nodes that I ran it against, any subtypes of information that are present, along with counts and volumes, different MIME types, the things that are in content server, along with counts, any reserved items. Metadata, you get a picture of all the different types of categories that are there. If I want to further drill into those, I can click on these and it gives me a URL back into content server. I'm not going to do that right now. Then you can start to look at containers. And if I had specified any aging parameters, I would get some reports here. And I didn't specify that in my report. So that's our first tool, the Discovery and Analytics tool. This can be really powerful at uncovering the details of what you're going to face with your content server environment. The next tool is our content server migration tool, which will allow you to pull out information. You may decide that you don't want to push everything to SharePoint Online, so you can do some exporting here with this tool down to a file system, and either keep your file structure or flatten it. If you know you're going to be moving to SharePoint Online, you don't have to worry about maintaining a hierarchical structure in your packages that are going to be sent to our Map It tool, which I'm going to show next, in order to load that into Azure for your migration to SharePoint Online. You can just say flat structure. I'm going to export all my metadata. I'm going to pull that all out, and it's going to be packaged up and ready to go to put into SharePoint Online. On the other hand, you may decide you want to do it hierarchical and maintain a structure because you're just going to archive some data that you're going to need, maybe to put somewhere else, or maybe you're just going to leave it on the file system because it's 10 years old, or it's already expired. We can choose how we want to export our metadata. We can export one big file, or we can export one file per file, which is actually how Content Server Exporter handles that. Then we can start to choose some settings here. We have the ability to say what we're going to do with our versions. Do we want to export all our versions, or just the last X number? Maybe 5 versions or 10 versions. If you have a ton, you can limit that if you want. Then SharePoint doesn't manage versions and extensions the way that Content Server does. Content Server actually allows you to have different versions, have different extensions. You can have version 1 be a Word document, version 2 be a PDF, version 3 be a TIFF file, version 4 be an Excel file. And it allows you to do that. SharePoint is not going to allow you to do that. So we have a way of dealing with that and splitting the versions. If you want to keep all of those separate versions, previous versions that are different, we can split them out and give them a name so that you can see that. Audit trail. Clearly, your SharePoint audit trail and your content server audit trail are not the same. They don't manage their audit trails in history the same way. But we give you the ability to actually export that audit trail and then import that into SharePoint Online with the files in another folder, so that should you need at some point in time to see the historical audit trail on any of these documents pre-migration, you can go back and you can look at that on a document by document level, see what happened to this document while it was still in Content Server, and then you would use the audit trail in SharePoint for the day forward audit history. You can also export custom views, exclude empty folders. You can also do some category and attribute filtering. Say you only want to export documents where the category equals engineering drawings, and the attribute and an attribute maybe vendor equals some company, and you can actually select just to export that data using that filter. We can replace characters. As you know, there's a lot of special characters in SharePoint Online that are not going to fly, that maybe were okay in Content Server. We can take care of correcting those in hex characters as well. We can also handle shortcuts and URL links, and we can also limit the transfer of information by date. So maybe we decide we only want to limit the we only want to migrate dates, information that's been modified since a certain date. And so we can actually say, let's get everything newer than this date. Then maybe later we decide we want to take everything that's older than that and then archive that to a separate location. We can actually do that as well. So that's something else that we can do when we want to do that that export from content server. Make sure I've selected something there. Now we can actually do an analysis, and we can actually run an analysis on this information that we're going to export before we export it. Let's see what this is telling me. Low in memory. Okay. And we can see that it's completed, and there's no errors here. So we know that if we export this, it's going to succeed, and it's just going to dump that information out, and I'll have a log here for the information that I'm exporting. Now, clearly, you're not going to export everything out of content server into packages all at the same time. You would have a massive package. You're going to want to do your planning based on your analysis and your discovery that you've done, and you're going to want to separate that into logical batches or pockets of information that you can manage practically and manage and push forward a little bit at a time so that you can control how that's going to work. Again, we get a complete report showing exactly what was pulled out. You can also see what we've done with the audit trail. You can see where we've replaced characters, get a full audit history, all of the parameters that were used and selected for this particular export. Okay, let me kill this because I think it might be taking memory. So now that we've got our packages from content server exported and ready to go, we can come into our Map It tool, and this is the powerhouse in our Migrate suite that's actually going to take those packages that we've pulled out of content server and push it into SharePoint Online. So we have the ability to create profiles, and each of these profiles can be a different configuration. In a different configuration, meaning each of them can push to a different Azure storage, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. They can push to a separate SharePoint online site collection. Let me make sure that I'm logged in here before I go any further. Yes, I'm still logged in. And then they can actually store different configurations for what we're doing with the data as we push it to SharePoint Online. As we walk through each of these tabs, you'll see all of the things that we can do to migrate the information. A lot of times people will have more than one consultant or resource actually migrating the data at the same time. And there's a database that's behind this that will allow each user that's running the Map It tool to work on their own profiles. And it stores all of the information about the systems in a database so that each of the users can manage it independently of each other and can focus on maybe different segments of the pockets of the information that they're moving from content server into SharePoint Online. So once we're ready to go, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through each of these tabs and start to specify what are we doing with this batch of data. And what's going to happen is we use Azure Storage, just a storage account, for temporary storage, not for long-term storage, but for temporary storage of the packages that we're going to send to M365. And as I describe it during the process, we're going to actually bundle that into packages to send into the Azure storage, and then we're going to tell Microsoft it's there. Hey, SharePoint, pick it up, use your migration API to ingest that information and put that where it needs to go according to the manifest or the property files that we push with our package. And you'll see how that works in a minute. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start talking about content. And we have the ability to specify where we're going to push this information. So our package is ready to go. We can say, are we still going to migrate all versions, or are we only going to migrate a certain number? We can choose our target. We want to choose my finance document library. If we don't see the library we want there and we want to push it somewhere else, we actually can create a library on the fly here, and we can enable versioning as we need to, and that will create a library there for us. There's also the ability to store mappings that we're going to do in these next couple of tabs into what's called a global mapping. So if I make a mapping once, I can automatically use that mapping later or in other profiles for my other data, and I can reuse that without having to redo the mapping. That's most commonly used for user mapping. So if I'm mapping users from Content Server into SharePoint Online, there's going to be users that own content in Content Server that don't exist in SharePoint Online. Maybe they don't work for the company anymore. So we'll have to be able to map that data over to a new owner. And once we do that mapping once, it can be reused. Same thing with metadata. All right. So right now I'm pulling in content types and columns from SharePoint based on the information that I provided earlier on the profile. And this is where I can actually map my information over. So for this batch of information, I may know that, for example, I've got some invoices in here and I want to map these invoices over. And all I do is select the name on each side and click the blue arrow, and it puts a checkbox, and I can do that for each one that I want to map over. And once I've done, you see they're green on this side, checks. The X are not mapped, and the green items over here are mapped. I can also do something that's really cool, is what we call metadata injection. I can inject new metadata that didn't exist here, but I know I'd like to carry forward, maybe global type information. So maybe I'd like to map something into the title on these invoices just so I know what it is. I can select this, click the plus sign, and that's going to add this to my metadata list. Now what I'm doing is I'm modifying the picture of what the to-be state is going to be in SharePoint. I'm not affecting anything that's in Content Server. Right now I'm working kind of in a playground, in a middle area, a staging ground where I'm configuring what I want the data to look like when it gets into SharePoint. So when I move to the Metadata Values tab, now I can see the package of information that I've pulled in. I can see the metadata that exists there now. Now I can do some things here that are pretty nifty. I can actually update the information and say, clean this up a little bit. So I want to put Frank's name on that. Here's my title. I also want to ingest or inject some information onto these items. And I can do a lot more than that. I can actually do search and replacement. Say you know that you've changed company names, or you want to change things en masse. You can actually do global searches and replaces here on this data and make changes on the fly while you're pushing this data in. You can also change it earlier in the source system, but this gives you a last opportunity to be able to make some changes if you want to. You can also see something here like a name. I can see that maybe if I recognize this person doesn't work for the company anymore, I can actually change it there on the fly too. Next tab is going to give us a pending structure for what the information is going to look like when I push it into SharePoint. And you see these items are green here. If I had a situation where the path length was too long, they would show up as red, and I would be able to correct that before I move forward. Now let's talk about users. You can see there's some users here on the left. These are users from Content Server, and I've already identified that there's some users that don't exist in SharePoint Online in AD. I can correct those by doing a mapping directly to another user. Like I know that's me, and so I know I'm in here. So I'm going to go ahead and map that. I'm also selected as the default user. So if I don't do anything, my name is going to get associated with those items. I can also say that I know that although Frank is an AD, he's not going to be with the company any longer. So I'm going to map Frank to me. So what's going to happen is when I move that information into SharePoint Online, his name is going to show up in the comments next to the item in the properties. In the version history, you'll see that he actually created that version, but you'll see me as the owner of the item in SharePoint. We can add these selections that we did to the global user mapping if we'd like to. That way, the next time we come through, we don't have to do these mappings again. They can be reused and they'll automatically be reapplied. And once we've got it configured the way we want, we can come in here and we can analyze what we've done. And what it's going to do is it's going to run through and it's going to see if it finds any issues, errors, warnings, and it's going to let us know. So it's first thing is telling us, warning, the user didn't exist in SharePoint. Okay, so we know we're good with that because it's going to actually map it to a default user. We saw that. We're okay with that. Here's our documents, versions, folders, total size. You can kind of see what's happening here, all of the configuration settings. And if we had seen any errors, we would have them indicated and we can go take care of that. Once we're ready to go, all we need to do is we start the migration. So what's happening now? This could be a really big chunk of information. So we're gathering this into sets of packages, and each package is about 100 megabytes. And we're going to create a manifest, a package of information to send to Microsoft, and we're going to place that up into Azure, the Azure that was defined on the profile that we looked at earlier. And then we're going to tell Microsoft with their migration API, hey, it's there, pick it up and ingest that. Once they pick it up, we're done. And we don't have anything else to do. Until they pick it up, we can actually cancel it. I'm not going to do that right now because I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pull this up so we can kind of start seeing things come in. But what's happening behind the scenes is we're packaging it up. We're getting all of the information together, getting all the files together, creating the manifest to tell Microsoft what to do with this, where to put it, how to map the versions, how to map the metadata, and we're going to start sending that up. And this could take a little bit of time depending on how much data it is, what time of day it is. They obviously recommend you do these kind of things in the evenings or when the systems are not, Microsoft 365, SharePoint Online, when they're not being used, because you could potentially get throttled if you do it and there's a lot of traffic. So as things progress, the status bar is going to show what's going on here, and you'll start to see the packages show up. And once they start getting migrated, you'll start to see things moving. And you can see things popping up over here on the right. And as things are moving, it's going to start creating things behind the scenes. You can already see it's in progress. And we're going to start, here's our audit trail that we moved in. We're starting to see some documents in here. And we can look at properties. We can see our invoice data show up. Here's the one I changed to my name from Frank's. But if we come back in here and we look at the version history, you'll see that this version was created by Frank, even though it was assigned to me as the owner in SharePoint, because Frank's not with the company anymore. And when this is complete, it's going to show you that it's complete. Let's take a look at some other information we have in here so you can see what we did. I want to point out to you, you'll notice that the modified dates and all the dates that are in the system are maintained to what they were in in content server. They're not today's date. They're not the date that we ran the report. Here's a document. You see that we actually replaced some of those special characters that were not going to fly in SharePoint Online. Here's a document that had some versioning in content server 0.1, 0.2, 1.0, 1.1, 2.0, and each of the versions histories were mapped over. You can see I'm the owner, but Frank's name is here because he was the original creator of this information in SharePoint Online. It's almost like the information has always lived here. You can see we did what we call a full fidelity migration. Everything is maintained. So by looking at this, there's not a lot of ways that you can look at it and see that it was migrated. We have different container types that we've handled that are don't exist in SharePoint Online, like compound documents, email folders, project folders. These are structures that exist in Content Server that SharePoint doesn't really have. But one thing that we can do with them is we can just carry them forward as a container. So anything that was in them would just be kept in that folder. We got our URL here. And looking back at our UI here on the migrate side, we can actually open up this log file and we can see what was done during the migration. You can see if there was any restructuring in the taxonomy or the folder structure. You can see what we mapped as far as metadata. We've also captured some information for link redirection. We have a tool that I'm not going to show you today, but I'm going to tell you what it is. It's called Link Redirector. And oftentimes, especially in Content Server, you have people that have created links inside of documents to other links inside of Content Server. So what we have is a link redirector that will listen and look for links to documents that have been moved, and we keep the information of where we moved the document in a database so that if someone makes a call or clicks on a link that's trying to call something in Content Server, we will catch it and we will redirect the link to where it lives in SharePoint Online. And this can actually be useful as well when you're doing migrations staged and you have stuff that's still in Content Server and half the stuff's been moved. If there's a link back to Content Server, we won't interrupt that link. It'll know that we haven't moved it yet, so it's going to link you back to Content Server to get that content where it lives. After the migration's done, we also can do a validation, and we have a couple of different ways to do validation. We literally will go and check everything that should have been moved and how many items we actually did move and capture that in a log file. We also, for very large volumes of data, if you're moving a big set, we have a asynchronous metadata read method, which is going to do the validation a little bit differently. It's going to batch up the calls to Microsoft in one big call to say, here's what I'm looking for to validate, answer all of this and send it back to me, and it'll come back and it'll be a little bit more efficient for larger sets of data that exist in Content Server that you're moving into SharePoint Online. After you've done the migration, we talked a little bit about permissions mapping. We didn't enable that for this profile, but what we can do in certain instances is maybe there are certain pockets of information that you would like to map permissions over. Maybe you have some group permissions for some folders that you would like to map over directly. And so we give you some tools here to be able to map those structures over. But we don't normally recommend you just do a whole like for like, one by one mapping of everything that was in Content Server into SharePoint. Some of the rules are differently handled with permissions, and Microsoft has different recommendations and best practices that we would hope you would follow when architecting your information in SharePoint Online. So with that, that actually completes the demonstration. And I believe we are...
Yeah, there should be at least one poll question that will pop up. Oops, it looks like we went to the beginning
Well,
of
we
the.
went back to the beginning. Take care of that. Sorry, that here, right here.
Perfect. So I'll go ahead and take back over. We showed a little bit of a demonstration on some high-level capabilities, not everything that Gimmal Migrate has to offer. So if you'd like a personalized demonstration for your organization, just let us know in this poll. And with that, it looks like we have at least a couple of Q&A questions, but I do want to remind everyone, feel free to submit your questions. We're going to jump into the Q&A now, so we can hopefully be respectful of your guys' time. But I see two in there, so John, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get started with those.
Yeah, sure.
So the first one is, how do you handle links, which I think you mentioned a little bit, but didn't show in your demonstration.
Sure, sure. So, yeah, I talked about it a little bit right at the end. Maybe the question came in sooner. Um, while we're doing the migration, we're capturing all of the data that we're moving, and we're tracking it in a database. And you can use the product without a database, but if you use it without a database, one, you can only work with one profile at a time, and two, you can't do link redirection. So there's an underlying database is a requirement for our using our tool if you want to do those two things, use more than one profile or use link redirector. And if you're going to use link redirector, what's going to happen is you enable it in the front and you say, I'm going to enable link redirection, and we start capturing information about the data and the source of the data. Where was it? All of its ID, all of the information about where it lives in tables way early in the process, so that later, after we move the data, we update that table and add additional information about where we put it. Because we could have not just moved it over and put it into the same folder in SharePoint Online. We could have actually redirected or restructured that, put it somewhere else completely. But we know where we put it, and we have some software called Link Redirector that's going to sit on an IIS server, and it's going to listen for calls to links that for content that used to be in content server. And if it knows it's moved it somewhere, it's going to link you to redirect you to the new location. So that's how we handle links. That's an option. That's not a required piece as far as our tools are. Don't have to use it, but if you do have a problem with links, that can help you at least get over the hurdle. We don't actually fix the links, but we enable the content to continue to be used if there are links that are present in your content.
Great. And the last one we have is, what versions of Content Server and SharePoint are compatible?
Okay, so on the content server side, I think we go back. Obviously, we can handle content server. We can handle live link. I think like 9x is kind of where we draw the line on the OpenText content server side. And on the SharePoint side, I showed you the Microsoft 365 SharePoint Online solution, so moving information up into Microsoft 365. We also have another tool that I did not show you that actually can move data straight from Content Server into SharePoint 2019. So on-prem or in your own private cloud, we can handle that as well. It's a different tool that I didn't show you, but it operates exactly the same way. And just an FYI, we also have the ability to migrate from Documentum to SharePoint Online as well.
Great, and that is the last Q&A question. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. If anyone has any more questions, both of our contact information is right there on the screen. You can also send us an email at info@gimmal.com, which I believe is on the next slide, or simply visit our website. For those of you who are interested in the recording of this webinar, we will be sending it out between 24 and 48 hours in the form of a thank you email. So please keep an eye out on your email if you'd like to view this recording. And we also hope to see everybody here again for our webinar next week. Cover all your bases, wide records management. Thank you for joining. Have a great rest of your day.